Okay, so I feel like me putting out this video, there's probably not a bunch of people who are gonna watch it because John Leguizamo is not a huge star, and this issue has been pushed back by the whole American community, cultural, social importance for like a long while. So John Leguizamo has pretty much gone out and said that what is it, Franco, what's his name, Franco, um, I forget what his name was, the guy, so Dave Franco is his brother, John Franco, no, not John Franco, he was a pitcher, anyway, there was a casting for Fidel Castro, and the actor, Franco, who's a pretty big star, he made some news because of the whole Me Too movement, and I'm gonna get his name right just about now off the tip of my tongue. I don't know. I don't know why I can't figure out what his name is, but he's been out of the limelight for a little bit because of the whole Me Too movement, and he got cast as Castro, and John Leguizamo apparently didn't like that because he thought it was appropriation. And I'm going to tell you why I support John Leguizamo. I'm glad I got his name right. John Leguizamo. Basically, it's like this. All right. I know this Franco guy. Franco is either an Italian name or a Portuguese name. Not necessarily, I'm sure there are other people. I'm sure that name Franco exists in the Spanish connotation, in the Brazilian, the whole Spanish American, Latino American connotation. All right. So, but essentially, he's European, quote unquote white, Portuguese, but still quote unquote white. There's no mixture of Latino. When John Leguizamo says Latino, I'm pretty sure he means of kind of mestizo heritage, or of the Spanish American struggle, quote unquote American and Spanish struggle, or at the very least from Spain. All right. And I understand why John Leguizamo, and I respect him for speaking out about this, because Rita Moreno has spoken out about this, that Latino Americans really have not been given their due, even if they have the numbers in this country, and they've had the numbers in this country since like 2000, which is like 20 years ago. They've had the numbers in this country. They've been the largest minority in this country since 2000. And they get virtually, up until recently, they haven't really gotten much representation. In fact, it's gone backwards, if anything. It's gone backwards, if anything. And I'll just do a parallel of what he's complaining about and what Asian Americans in this country have complained about. So Asian Americans in the 80s and maybe up to the mid 90s had a pretty good representation. All right. And you might be surprised at this. A lot of people might be surprised at this. What are you talking about? That was like 30 years ago. They had really good representation, right? From the 80s. If you guys watch any of the movies from the 80s, any of the TV shows, whenever they presented Asian Americans, it wasn't always stereotypical. Now, well, every once in a while you might get a stereotypical representation, but it wasn't racist stereotypical representation like what they did from 1995 to 2017. All right. And it wasn't like they constantly put up these Bobby Lee types. It wasn't constantly like they put up these Kim Jong types, these small little Asian dudes that you might see in like some 1940s movie or something like that. Even in 1940s kind of movie, they didn't continually Well, maybe they did, but the Asian Americans in the 80s and mid 90s, that was pretty much a buildup of really good representation from the 70s, maybe from the 60s. You know, you had Mr. Miyagi, even though he was kind of stereotypically short, whatever, they showed him with a lot of dignity. You ever seen like Prince of Darkness? There were at least 2 Asian Americans there. They're always shown with dignity. They spoke perfect English. Dustin Nguyen had a spot on 21 Jump Street. City Guys had a Filipino, kind of a male Filipino, pretty much male lead. Dean Cain was on Superman. You know, I know they kept on pushing this whole martial arts stereotypes during that period, but it was an identity. It was at least an identity, all right? There was at least some representation. And we all knew that white people, Jews, white people had pretty much an umbrella of roles and casting and stuff like that. And then they probably took 10% of any minority roles, and then they split it up to blacks, Jews, Latinos, whatever, what have you. And when they split it up pretty evenly with that 10%. All right. Now, after 95, when hip hop took over, that's when the blacks, the Jews, and the whites essentially just split this country up, the cultural Hollywood, into black and white. Everybody else took a back seat. So it was like they tried to split it up into like just black and white, and then everybody else, they pretty much gave that 1%. And it wasn't just a 1% to like Latinos, Jews, gays, you know, women, etc., etc. They didn't just take that one. They bashed that 1%. Like any kind of stereotype they could think of, they'll put it out there. If, you know, back then when gays were like a negative thing and nobody wanted to be associated with gays, they constantly put like Asian males in that spot. Like, for whatever reason, they kept on associating Asian males with that. You know, if there was some kind of role, a gay role, they would put every once in a while they'll put like an Asian male in that role. It was the most demeaning, racist, stereotypical, racist, cultural terrorism that you could think of. And if you guys don't believe me, just look at any production, TV, movie, whatever, from like 1995 to like 2017. You won't find any strong Asian male lead roles that are even normalized. All right, so and during that period, the whole of martial arts culture, that whole culture was pretty much appropriated by whites and blacks, essentially, mostly by whites. But that was entirely appropriated until like 2017, when social media took over and people made a big stink about it. And anytime they try to do this and made an excuse as to why they would appropriate something and put somebody who wasn't Asian in a spot, they would get hammered for it by social media, Twitter, etc. And that actually stopped them from doing that. But from 1995 to around 2017, Hollywood made every excuse for the racism towards Asian Americans, Latino Americans, gay people, Arabs, whatever have you. People who weren't black and white, because the blacks, the Jews, and the whites pretty much monopolized the entirety of the media. So why am I going off on a tangent on this? I'm not going off on a tangent on this. This is connected to what John Leguizamo is saying. They should boycott this whole Fidel Castro movie, casting a person who is not Latino, because Latinos don't get enough representation, which is a fact. Whites get enough representation. Blacks get enough representation. In fact, black people get like more than the representation that they deserve for their population size in this country, and so do the Jews. They won't. Here's how you build up. Okay, here's why this whole message about appropriation is important. All right, this whole message about appropriation is important because Hollywood should have had a quota system where they had like a certain amount of blacks, a certain amount of whites, a certain amount of Asians, an equal amount of everybody in the industry. Like they kind of have now, where where everybody is portrayed positively, everybody is given a certain amount of roles, etc., etc. You know, it's not a perfect system, but it's better than what existed pre-2017 over the last 20 years, 25 years. It's better than that at this point, like miles better than that. Because if you were Asian, Latino, whatever have you, during that period pre-2017, you know, it was like they went out their way to not include you, and if they did include you, it was always something stereotypical, racist, etc., etc. But let me get back to John Leguizamo. All right, this Hollywood industry is not. It should have been equal opportunity for everybody. It shouldn't have been this cronyism. It shouldn't have been nepotism. It shouldn't have been civil rights organizations just pushing the agenda for their own people. It should have been an equal opportunity environment for everybody, where everybody got a chance, and that did not exist. That did not exist. All right, they don't push the most talented. They don't push the hardest working. They don't push that agenda. What they push is nepotism, cronyism. They push a racial ideology. If you have a civil rights group that pushed them hard enough to a certain agenda. Outside of that, if you were Asian, if you were Latino, if you were Arab, if you were gay back then, but not now, because gay people have a lot of power in this street at this point, because of the civil rights organization, because they kept on saying, we want a place in Hollywood. It matters to us. It should matter to everybody, because here's the thing about it, okay? Hollywood is not just entertainment. A lot of people think it's just entertainment. You know, it's just, oh, we're going to put out a movie, we're going to put out a TV show. It's not going to have an influence on anything. But that's not true. It has a huge influence on everybody. It has a huge influence on society. It has a huge influence on creating stereotypes. It has a huge influence on brainwashing people. It has the ability to change the minds of the population. All right, it's a brainwashing machine. First and foremost, before you guys consider Hollywood as entertainment, it's a brainwashing machine. Every single image that gets shown has the ability to positively or negatively affect how people see themselves, how other people see other people. So this is why it's important. This is why this is important. So if you don't see, as John Leguizamo says, if you don't see enough Latino Americans, and they constantly, instead of hiring Latino Americans, they go out their way to just put like white people in the roles, or in some cases they'll take black people and then put it in Latino roles and stuff like that. It really does undermine the group cohesion, the racial cohesion, the cohesion and the dignity of that group. All right, and once they start doing that, it's a slippery slope, because they'll keep on doing that. So if there's not a lot of your group in there, and they start appropriating and putting people who aren't Latino in these roles, it's a slippery slope, because they'll start doing that, and then there'll be less of people in these roles. So it's just wrong all the way around, and people who excuse it and saying that cultural appropriation doesn't exist, it doesn't exist, they don't have that problem, because they're either black or white, and then they already have the numbers. And they keep using these numbers to increase their numbers in the media. That's why you see so many blacks in the media. That's why you see so many Jews in the media. That's why you still see so many whites in the media, even though they spread out the love a little bit better than they did 5-6 years ago. It's still not even, it's still wrong, because of what they did over the last 20 years, where they went out their way to monopolize the cultural identity, the cultural significance of Hollywood. They monopolized that, and they kept kept people out. Not only did they keep people out, but they bashed the hell out of everybody else. The Asian American image, I've always said that the Asian American image that was built up decades and decades and decades was essentially destroyed by Hollywood. All right, Hollywood essentially used the media to terrorize the hell out of Asian Americans, Asian people from 1995 to 2017. And like I said, they couldn't do it anymore after 2017 because of social media, because people started voicing, they had an ability to voice their concerns about certain things, and they voiced their concerns about certain things, and Hollywood can't just excuse that anymore. It's like the Me Too movement, where they couldn't excuse the misogyny, the oppression of women, sexual assaults, rapes by these people who had the power at the time to do what they did. So I'm all for the Me Too movement. I'm all for the trans movement. I'm all for the gay movement. I'm all for John Leguizamo's Latino movement. Latino Americans really need to step up. They really, really, really need to speak out about this. All right, there should be a huge Latino American celebritydom in America right now. All right, because they've been the large minority since 20 years ago. There should be a huge Asian American stardom in America, because there's really two cultures that Hollywood lifts off of, and that's pretty much either white culture or Asian culture. And it just feels to me that the whole Asian culture was pretty much appropriated by whites, Jews, and blacks over the last 20 years. I'm glad they're not able to do that these days, and I'm glad that this voice is now rising up. All right, this should be the new Me Too movement, where it pretty much kills off the last of the racism that exists that exists in Hollywood still in 2022. They're diversing because they need to diverse, because there are so many voices telling them that they can't be doing the racism that they've committed for the last 20 years and get away with it. And I'm so glad about that. And all you Latinos should definitely go out there and support John Leguizamo. And by the way, this is America. All right, we're all Americans. Asian Americans are Americans. John Leguizamo is Latino Americans. We don't need to hear about what's happening in why don't these Asian movies cast white people or black people? Why don't these Latino movies in Latin America cast Asian people? But that argument, you could say, why don't these African movies? Because Africa has their own productions. All right, Africa has their own productions. Germany, Russia, for the whites, have their own productions, and most of them are like pretty much all black or all white cast. They don't have other. So there's a non-argument in that, and that argument is very, very racist, because if you think about it, you're pretty much saying that Asian Americans and Latino Americans are not as American as white or black Americans. So that's a huge problem with it, and I feel that definitely, guys. Definitely support John Leguizamo. Definitely get more Latinos. Definitely get more Asian Americans. Definitely get more Indian Americans, Arab Americans. Fill up Hollywood with as many different Americans as possible, because not only do people need to see that there are more that other Americans are as or more Americans than these white or black people who are essentially committing racism when they do that. They are essentially committing racism against you when they block you out of an image within the American cultural social system. And I gotta tell you, black people did that, contributed to the racism. Black people in Hollywood and the Jews in Hollywood so much contributed to the racism against Asian Americans, against Latino Americans, against gay people, against women for a good 20 years. They had a 20-year run of absolutely just monopolizing the cultural structure of America, that they created social caste systems. They created social caste systems that did not, that shouldn't exist in a country that is pretty much a country that should have included everybody. They use that as a weapon. They use that as a cultural weapon to increase the benefits of their race while just decreasing the benefits of everybody else's race, or an inclusion of everybody else's people, race in this country. So go out and fight that good fight, people, because everybody needs to voice so much concern about this, and they should have voiced so much concern about this 20 years ago. They should have started a commission that had a quota system, not just because Hollywood employs people, but because Hollywood brainwashes people. That's the most important thing. I would care so much less about this if I knew for a fact that all these movies and TV shows that came out was just about money and employment. It's not. All right, it's not. There is a huge agenda that was constantly put out for a good 20 years that had no inclusion of everybody outside of blacks and whites. And it's time that not only that you guys go out and fight this, but you guys need to get some payback for it, because 20 years of cultural terrorism is just 20 years. It's just wrong, beyond wrong, because beyond being racist, beyond wrong, it had an absolute deteriorating psychic effect on certain groups and people, from trying to live the best life possible, trying to live the American dream, trying to live the American dream. All right, guys,